And now, my opening statement. Americans got over the racial divide when we elected a black president, not only once, but twice. Americans overwhelmingly voted for the man, blind to his color. His color made no difference to American voters. Long past the issue of race, voters long past the Civil War, long past the Civil Rights era, focused more on the content of the character than the color of the skin. But this week's shooting of 12 police officers and 2 civilians in Dallas is a reflection of a new, deep division created by that very man. The shooting in Dallas was not just about racism. Make no mistake, that dirtbag shooter, who will remain nameless in this open, was a racist. An African-American, he wanted to kill only white people, especially white officers. And the shooting in Dallas wasn't just about police brutality. I got news for you, folks. Police brutality is colorblind. It crosses all racial and ethnic lines. I know, I prosecuted them. And it wasn't just about someone mentally ill. I've always found that stigma too easy an excuse for evil. And it wasn't about guns either. Dallas was about anarchy. It was about lawlessness. It was about rhetoric, the rhetoric that too easily inflames those who feel wronged, rhetoric that does nothing but repeatedly stoke the flames and scars of old wounds resolved long ago. At a time when Americans were both experiencing and fearing the reality of a Muslim jihad against us, our president, at a prayer breakfast no less, attempts to reconcile or explain murders in the name of Allah with this.
And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ.
And after the shooting of 12 police officers, he seeks to again remind us not of the situation of the 12 officers shot, the shooting and the injured and the trauma that surrounded it, but instead talks of the deaths of 2 African Americans. A follow-up that seems like another get off your high horse, folks, it's your turn.
Americans of all races and all backgrounds are also rightly saddened and angered about the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, and about the larger persistent problem of African Americans and Latinos being treated differently in our criminal justice system.
The problems of African Americans and Latinos being treated differently in our criminal justice system. Every chance he gets, he stokes the flames. Example, Trayvon Martin, followed by a not guilty verdict. And Ferguson's Michael Brown, a thug who tried to grab a cop's gun and got himself shot. There wasn't even a grand jury indictment and not even federal charges against the police officer. But Ferguson was about anarchy, and anyone with a functioning brain would have to assume that for Michael Brown to grab a cop's gun suggests it wasn't his first encounter with the law. Who told Brown that he and not the law should be in control? Yet the Department of Justice and the Attorney General and high-end government officials all rushed to Ferguson, to his funeral as well. And Baltimore, another training ground for anarchists, a perceived wrong. The response, based on rhetoric of racial injustice and hate, that should be a violent protest? The response should be the burning of businesses, many owned by African Americans? And a DA who outrageously runs to a microphone and announces an indictment of 6 cops saying she hears the calls of a lawless mob? And again, all the police painted as racist, yet no convictions. And it was an African American judge who made the calls. And in New York, the chant, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now." And then 2 cops innocently eating lunch in their squad car, assassinated not long after. When we have leaders who vehemently support the First Amendment language and protest the call for the deaths of those who wear the badge, but then caution the rest of us not to say something that would offend another's religion.
And if, in fact, we defend the legal right of a person to insult another's religion, we're equally obligated to use our free speech to condemn such insults and stand shoulder to shoulder with religious communities, particularly religious minorities who are targets of such attacks.
And our president, upon hearing of the assassination of 5 police officers, all white, and the shooting of another 7 officers, wants to talk about a white kid walking into a black church shooting. Why, Mr. President, are you even bringing this up? It's the same thing you did at the prayer breakfast. After an American has his head cut off, you want to talk about the Crusades. It's as if it's your turn. Mr. President, you have done nothing but tell us we deserve it. You have done nothing but look back in the rearview mirror. But when I look at Dallas, all I saw were whites and blacks running away from anarchy. All I saw were whites and blacks picking each other up. That's the America I see, and no one is going to change my mind. And no one, not even you, Mr. President, is going to do that. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on Facebook or Twitter. Hashtag Judge Jeanine. And with me now, live from Dallas, Rod Wheeler, a former D.C. homicide detective and Fox News contributor. Good evening, Rod. All right, lockdown there for the last couple of hours. What's going on there now that they say that the threat they thought was there is gone?
That's right, Judge. Good evening to you. In these types of situations, anytime you have a lot of people on the street after this horrific shooting situation that occurred on Thursday, we sometimes receive threatening phone calls from copycats, people who just want the cops to jump through hoops. I did have the opportunity a few minutes ago to talk to a sergeant with the police department here in Dallas, and he told me that they're ready. They've been prepared. Actually, at the police headquarters, which is only about a half a mile from where I'm standing, he said they had police officers around the headquarters all day today. But let me just show you something real quickly that this sergeant showed me earlier. Judge, where I'm standing is less than a half block away from where the shooting occurred the other day. And I'm not sure if you and the viewers can see this, but there's a red brick building right behind me here. That's the actual parking garage that the shooter initially started shooting in. You may recall, Judge, that there was a lot of discussion about this being a triangular type of shooting event. Well, the reason that happened is because the shooter moved around. He started there, and then he went across the street, and you can see those pillars right beyond my arm here, and that's where the guy ended up. That's also where he shot the final police officer. This investigation is still going on. The Dallas police have about a 2.5 block radius cornered off. They're still investigating. They're still collecting a lot of evidence, Judge.
All right, Rod, now what is the feeling in the community? I've seen a lot of kind of makeshift, graves and flowers and messages. One of my producers there in Dallas, what are people saying?
You know what? I'm glad you asked me that, because I've been out here embedded with the community all day today, and I can tell you African Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, everybody in this city has come together, and they're standing arm in arm. And I'll tell you, it's really remarkable. But to me, it's a testament of what this country is all about. And you're going to talk to some of these people, I know, later on in the show, but I can tell you that, everybody is caring about each other, and they support their police here, which is a good thing. The police told me, they said, Rod, we're hurting still because they lost 5 of their own. They sacrificed their lives, as we all know.
And, I got to tell you, Rod, I mean, my sense is that, all this talk of, racism and all this other stuff, it's more about, given the fact that you've got a black police chief and we've got a black president, we've got, all of these officials who are African-American. It's not about that. It's about lawlessness. It's about anarchy. It's about the hatred for the rule of law and people thinking that they have the right to take the law into their own hands.
Absolutely. But you know what? Here's the other thing, Judge, and you'll find this very interesting. The Black Lives Matter movement, the protest that was going on the other night, it was very peaceful.
Yeah.
There was no trouble whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the police sergeant told me today, he said it was one of the most peaceful protests that they've had. And this shooter, Mekhi Johnson, what he did, he hijacked that movement, he hijacked that protest, and at 9:02 is what the police department is telling me, that's when he had positioned himself, and then that's when he decided to shoot the officers. That guy, Mekhi Johnson, had nothing to do with the Black Lives Matter movement.
And finally, the police chief, Chief Brown. He seems, although he hasn't gotten a lot of national attention before this, he seems a man who is totally devoted to that city and to the force and is able to do both.
He is. He's a great police chief. I talked to a number of the street officers here today. They all seem to like this leader, and that's exactly what he is, and that's exactly, Judge, what we need. We need leadership like Chief Brown. We need leadership like Chief Lanier in Washington, D.C. And I honestly believe that we're headed in the right direction now. I honestly also believe that Black Lives Matter and police departments across the country will eventually come together, and we're going to work this situation out.
All right. Thanks so much, Rod Wheeler. Much more from Dallas ahead in our special 2-hour edition of Justice. We're going to hear from eyewitnesses who were actually there when the carnage broke out. And then we're going to head to the hospital to check out on the conditions of some of the wounded. Our live coverage on Justice resumes in a moment.